So in this lecture, we're going to look at diet and cancer with a focus on prevention. So what dietary components play a role in cancer prevention, but not really so much about treatment. If you're interested in the relationship of how you should eat or what you should or shouldn't eat if you have cancer, then you would want to take like a specific diet and disease class. Today, the focus is going to be pretty much on the prevention of cancer. We include the topics of diet and cancer in a class of this nature because cancer is, right after heart disease, the #2 leading cause of death in the United States. And if you look at this slide here, you see the ones with red bars are diet-related diseases. Heart disease, already established in this class, a very strong relationship between the foods you eat and whether or not you get heart disease. With regards to cancer, though, there's a pretty strong dietary correlation as well. Okay? We have to keep in mind, though, we don't know what causes cancer in many cases, so it's very difficult to say eat this or don't eat that so you don't get cancer. Instead, we look at large-scale studies that can show us links between, okay, it looks like people who get cancer eat this way or don't eat this way, and then we make assumptions. Okay, but no one's saying, and I'm certainly not saying from this lecture, oh, if you eat this way or that way, you won't get cancer, although we have pretty good data to show if you eat a certain way, you can reduce cancer risk. And then diabetes is also on that list, which we've looked at as far as being a diet-related cause of death in the United States as well. With regards to diet and cancer prevention, okay, there's a lot of data that comes from the World Cancer Research Fund and the American Institute for Cancer Research. And these two groups kind of join forces to put out recommendations to people around the world as far as what can you do to prevent cancer. Okay? It is estimated that 1 in every 3 cancer cases can be prevented. So in order to reduce your cancer risk, we talk about a number of lifestyle changes that people can undergo. What we're saying, though, is that not all cases of cancer can be prevented. You could have a perfect diet, okay, and exercise all the time and never smoke and don't get too much sun exposure, and you might still get cancer. And on the flip side, you can live a really high-risk life and maybe never get cancer. But there is about 1/3 of cancer cases currently that we think could be prevented by some of the tips and the lifestyle changes that I'll mention today. I want to introduce you to a concept called the New American Plate. Okay, and this is a teaching tool that was created by the American Institute for Cancer Research. And long before MyPlate became the USDA's tool of choice for teaching nutrition education, the New American Plate was used. Okay, and so dietitians and health professionals have been using plate-based teaching methods for a long time, and one of the most popular ones for a long time was called the New American Plate. And what the New American Plate says is that in order to prevent cancer, the diet should look pretty much like what you see on the plate here. It's not surprising that 2/3 or more of that plate is made up of vegetables, whole grains, and beans, and 1/3 or less is made up of animal protein. And you guys will see that this is a recurrent theme in today's lecture, which is the more plants you can eat and the less animal foods you can eat is a shift in your diet that lends to prevention against cancer. So this plate is slightly different from MyPlate, but in a lot of ways it's similar, right? Most of the foods on the plate are plant foods. In MyPlate, half the plate is fruits and vegetables, and 1/4 is grains. In this plate, they say make 2/3 fruits, vegetables, or grains. And again, when you're talking about cancer, they don't talk so much about food groups as they do plant versus animal foods. So again, this is the New American Plate, and it's an ideal way for all of us to be eating. And on top of that, you would help to reduce your rates of cancer, or at least reduce cancer risk.
So is this this was one before the one that we have now, right?
So the question is this the plate that came before the one we have now? And the answer is yes. This New American Plate, it's from an independent cancer-based body, though. It's not the USDA. It's not a national tool like MyPlate that's applicable to all populations. This is developed specifically by this nonprofit association, the American Institute for Cancer Research, and it did precede MyPlate. And they're both useful in their own regards. Most people don't eat like that, right? Most of their plate is made up of white bread and meat. If you can shift your plate so most of your plate is made up of whole grains and fruits and vegetables, you're doing a good job. Okay, so this is kind of the crux of what the World Cancer Research Fund and the American Institute for Cancer Research have said when they talk about those 100 cases of cancer and about 33 of them could be prevented, 33 of them could be prevented if people enacted the following changes that you see here. And this slide is kind of busy, but the pictures give you a good idea of what the basic tenets are. The first one is 5 a day. Okay, we're talking about diet on the first row. It says an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Literally, eating fruits and vegetables may reduce the risk for many cancers. Fruits and vegetables are plant food, so it makes sense. Shake off salt. Too much salt increases your risk of stomach cancer. Eat no more than 5 grams a day. And that's 5 grams of salt, okay, which works out to about 2,500 milligrams of sodium. Remember, because sodium chloride makes up salt. Stay out of the red is the third one. Eating lots of beef, pork, and lamb, bacon, and sausages is associated with colorectal cancers. We talked about that when we talked about the benefits of eating plant-based foods, is that it lowers your risk of colon cancer. The more animal foods you eat, the higher your risk of colon cancer is. The fourth one on the top there is not so sweet. Sugary drinks, sweet, and fatty foods can cause weight gain, which increases your cancer risk. Okay? Instead of drinking sugary beverages, water's better. In the second row, go for the gut. Eating lots of fiber from fruits and vegetables and whole grains cuts your rate of colon cancer. Again, high meat, low fiber intake is high risk for colon cancer. High plant, low meat intake, lower risk for colon cancer. Okay, the next set is talking about take care. Okay, this is taking care of your body. Get sweaty. Do 30 minutes of physical activity a day. And kids should do more like 60. That reduces your risk for several major cancers. Know your limits with regards to alcohol. Alcohol increases cancer risk. No more than 2 drinks for men and 1 for women per day. Love your skin. Sizzling in the sun or in a sunbed increases your risk of developing skin cancer, especially if you're under 30. So stay out of the sun. And then in the last row, quit. The world's single biggest cause of cancer is cigarettes and cigarette smoke. More than 25% of all cancer death and more than 10% of all death is attributable to cigarette smoke. Okay? And this is globally on a worldwide scale. Downsize is what the scale says. Being overweight is linked with several cancers, like cancer of the esophagus, colorectal, breast, and kidney. Get vaccinated. Infections like Hep B, C, and HPV cause up to 20% of cancer deaths in developing countries. That's not so much the problem in the United States. And then last one, become an eco-warrior. Environmental pollution of air, water, and soil with cancer-causing chemicals accounts for somewhere between 1 to 4% of all cancers. Okay. As far as kind of a top 10 list goes for cancer prevention, this summarizes some basic recommendations from this big report. It came out in 2007. Even though that's a while ago, it's still a very relevant topic. Okay? And research indicates that the following steps can help reduce cancer risk, some of which are repeats of what you just heard. Number 1, body fatness. Having more body fatness increases cancer risk. So on the flip side, being as lean as possible within the normal range of body weight helps to lower risk of cancer. Physical activity, you want to be physically active every day of your life if you can. There are foods and drinks that promote weight gain. Since high weight is associated with cancer, you'd want to stay away from energy-dense foods, so fried foods and sugary foods. Plant foods, eat mostly foods of plant origin. With regards to animal foods, limit the intake of red meat and avoid processed meat. Alcoholic drinks should be limited. And also a new interesting twist is the impact of preserved, processed, and burned meat products. Okay? We have some data showing that really, really salty foods, okay, like cured meats and pickled foods, those are a really big percentage of your diet, as well as if burned meat products, so like charred black meat products, are something that you consume on a regular basis. Those actually contain what are called carcinogens. Okay? And a carcinogen is something that causes cancer. Okay, so no one's saying that if you just eat regular meat, it's going to cause cancer, but if on a regular basis you had high intakes of salty meats or burned meats, that could increase your risk of cancer because it acts as a carcinogen. With regards to dietary supplements, you should aim to meet your nutritional needs through diet alone. And this is a very important concept for people with cancer. Because we don't know what causes cancer, and because there's no known cure for cancer, Many people turn to dietary supplements as a way to, what they perceive, to fill in the gaps with Western medicine. And while there certainly are some supplements that can help alleviate pain and also can maybe fill nutrient gaps in people who have cancer, oftentimes cancer patients are very susceptible to spending a lot of money on worthless products that they think are going to cause their cancer that won't. So all of the major international and U.S. cancer bodies say, try to meet your needs from foods alone. Okay? Cancer or dietary supplements are not going to cure your cancer for you no matter what they say. Breastfeeding, we see that moms who breastfeed and kids who are breastfed seem to have lower rates of cancer, certain types of cancer. And then as far as cancer survivors, if you've gone through cancer and you've beat cancer, the same recommendations listed here above above the bottom one, they all apply to cancer survivors as well. Okay, you're not off the hook just because you've had cancer once. You still need to be engaged in those preventative measures. So as far as cancer prevention goes from kind of a higher macro level, we know that the optimal way for you to prevent cancer lies somewhere at the intersection of having a healthy weight, having a healthy diet, and being physically active. Okay, so the tip above the purple circle for weight is aimed to be a healthy weight throughout life. From the green circle, choose mostly plant foods, limit your red and avoid processed meats. And then for physical activity, be physically active every day in any way for at least 30 minutes or more. Question?
Yeah, kind of going back to the last slide.
Uh-huh.
If like someone's had cancer before, are they more susceptible to cancer again? Or is that like a case-by-case basis?
So the question is, if someone has had cancer before, are they more susceptible of getting it again, or is it kind of on a case-by-case basis? It really depends on a case-by-case basis and what type of cancer it is. There are certainly cancers that have very, very strong genetic lines. For example, breast cancer. You can be tested for the breast cancer gene if it runs in your family. And people usually know, listen, I'm at really high risk, and they could even get it multiple times. Sometimes if you get one type of cancer, even though you may treat that area, it may have metastasized to other areas. It may remain latent for a while and then kind of rear its ugly head later down the road. So it's really hard, no one ever really feels confident saying they're in 100% remission because that chance to come back always does exist. But we know that you also have the potential to develop multiple types of cancer that maybe aren't even related. You could have skin cancer and pancreatic cancer from two totally different reasons. And it's very unfortunate, but that could certainly happen as well. Okay. So just in summary, a couple more important points about the major tenets here of cancer prevention. The key is plant foods. Okay? Eat at least 5 servings a day of a variety of what we say non-starchy fruits and vegetables. It's basically don't count potatoes as your vegetable. Okay? Potatoes are a vegetable, and after taking a nutrition course of this nature, you know about the benefits with fiber and potassium, etc. But most people don't eat potatoes in a healthy form, right? They eat them breaded and deep fried and as French fries. Okay? So focus on the non-potato products and get at least 5 a day. Eat relatively unprocessed grains. Most grains that people in the United States eat are highly refined grains, white breads and cinnamon buns and pizza and pasta. You want to shift away from those towards more of the whole grains. And then on top of that, limit your refined and starchy foods. With regards to animal foods, the focus is on minimizing animal foods. If you do eat red meat, okay, the two bodies that put out this report together in 2007 said that for optimal cancer prevention, it's ideal to eat less than 18 ounces of red meat a week. Red meat are things like beef, lamb, and veal. Okay? But it also includes certain cuts of pork. Because while pork technically is a lean meat, there's very, very high-fat cuts of pork. Okay? The exception of the loin. Pork loin is lean. But if you're talking about ham or bacon, we usually count those towards your red meat content. Okay, so 18 ounces a week, okay, think about the fact that 3 ounces is equivalent to the size of the palm of your hand. So you basically get the equivalent of 6 of the palm of your hands a week for red meat max. So basically, that's almost 1 a day, no more than that amount of red meat a day. And if you think about the typical serving of red meat that you eat if you go to a restaurant, like an 8-ounce filet is usually the smallest size you can get. Occasionally you see a 6-ounce petite filet. But the smallest steak you would be inclined to order at a restaurant would be 8 ounces. If you have 2 of those in a week, that's almost your max intake of red meat a week. Okay, so we really want to focus on limiting the amount of red meat you eat and also minimizing your processed meat intake. So all the salted meats, like a lot of lunch meats and a lot of jerkies and a lot of cured meats, very, very high sodium contents in those meats have been linked to higher rates of certain types of cancer. With regards to alcoholic drinks, consuming no more than the equivalent of 1 drink per day for women and 2 drinks per day for men. Okay, and here's what an alcoholic drink is. Okay, it's 12 ounces of beer or 5 ounces of wine or 1.5 ounces of 80 proof liquor. The proof is just double the alcohol content. So that's the same thing as saying 1.5 ounces of 40% alcohol. Again, the serving sizes that count as a drink is a 12-ounce beer, 5 ounces of wine, or 1.5 ounces of an 80 proof liquor, basically a shot. Okay? So if you have a drink and they pour you 2 shots in there, 3 ounces, that's technically 2 drinks, even though it only comes in 1 glass. And for women, that would actually be exceeding the daily recommended intake for alcohol. We know that very high alcohol intake is associated with higher rates of cancer of the mouth and the esophagus and the throat. Okay. Oftentimes when you see cancer of the mouth, esophagus, or throat, that has to do with either very high alcohol or high tobacco intake throughout one's lifetime. Okay. You don't meet people, for the most part, who've never drinking and never smoked cigarettes with high rates of cancer of the mouth, esophagus, and throat. It could certainly happen. But very high alcohol intake is associated with those upper body cancers. I mentioned salt, okay, avoiding salt preserved, salted, or salty foods. Okay, and there's lots of different recommendations. In some places it says eat less than 5 grams, and others it says eat less than 6 grams. And I won't bore you with the details of exactly how many grams you have. Okay, but we're aiming for somewhere under 2,400 milligrams of sodium. Remember, the typical American has greater than 3,000 milligrams a day. And the goal for cancer prevention is less than 2,400 milligrams. So cutting out those really salty meats, if you eat a lot of those foods, is an easy way to get your number below 2,400. And you might think we're bad in the United States, okay? The U.S., it actually says here, it's about 3,400 is the typical U.S. intake. But look at some of the other countries, okay? Especially Hungary, over 6,000 milligrams of sodium a day. Okay? Barbados up in that range, Japan, Chile, South Africa, even the UK consumes more salt than the typical American. A lot of the foods in those diets are increasingly becoming packaged and processed. And remember, the primary source of sodium in the U.S. diet is not from the salt shaker. It's from packaged, processed, and fast foods. All that salt added as a preservative works negatively for you in the sense it actually increases your risk of cancer. And then in summary, keep in mind that your weight does drive cancer risk as well. Okay? Doing whatever you can to get your weight into that healthy body weight range is recommended for lots of different chronic diseases, but also because it helps to lower cancer risk. So we want to stay away from foods and drinks that promote weight gain, like sugary drinks, energy-dense foods, so those are basically fried foods and really sugary foods. And then if you do consume fast foods, do sparingly, if at all, because not only are fast foods high in fat, they're also super high in sodium. Okay? And they tend to be animal-based foods at fast food or fried foods that are high in sodium. Both of those things increase cancer risk. The last slide here is just mentioning body fatness. Okay. In the international recommendations, they recommend a BMI towards the lower end of normal starting at age 21. Okay, for kids, we don't really know as much about how weight affects cancer risk, but we know that by the time you move into adulthood, the higher you are up on that BMI curve, the greater your chance of early mortality is, including risk from cancer death. So try to maintain your body weight within a normal range from age 21. You also want to watch out for weight gain and increases in waist circumference throughout adulthood. Remember, if you're gaining weight and it's all going into your central area, we call that the visceral fat. Okay? And visceral fat is very dangerous in the sense that it's more metabolically active than other fat, can leach into the bloodstream and alter your blood lipids in a way that actually increases your risk of heart disease, but in turn it looks also like it could increase your risk of certain types of cancer as well. So that concludes the lecture on diet and cancer prevention.